The first blow had already landed when Nova Adeyemi dropped the freight manifest and moved. Silas Boone, a blind cane seller near the platform, was on the ground, accused of stealing a phone by a well-dressed stranger. Nova stepped between them, pinned the man's wrist, and refused cash thrown at her feet in front of 40 phones. But Silas was not just a blind cane seller. He was the missing father of Billionaire CEO Imani Boone. Nova Adeyemi is 36 years old, a freight loader at the city bus terminal, and the kind of woman who deadlifts a crate for a coworker and then apologizes for being sweaty. For 4 years, she has trained kids for free at a community weightlifting hall near the depot. She knows most of their parents by name, and she earns just enough to keep the hall's lights on one more month. But by the time the clip video reaches 2 million views, nobody knows that version of her. The internet knows only the frame. A muscular woman grabbing a man's wrist while a blind man sits on the concrete. The full truth never made it into the shareable clip. Silas Boone carries a small voice recorder everywhere. Being blind, he records sound so he can remember faces by voice. That tiny recorder holds the entire incident. But Imani Boone does not know that yet. She has spent 4 years searching for him, ever since he vanished from a care facility. Now she finally finds him in a viral video. What she needs to answer is far more difficult. Who is Nova Adeyemi when no one important is watching? And why did she refuse cash in front of 40 phones? But before Imani can ask, the city decides Nova is a threat. To understand how fast the city turned on Nova, go back to the morning the video was recorded. Silas Boone arrived at the north platform before sunrise. He is blind, but he knows the terminal by sound, the rumble of freight trucks, the hiss of bus doors, the particular click of his carved canes against the concrete. He sets up near the stairs with a small wooden stool and a leather pouch hanging from his cane. Tucked into the pocket of his worn coat is a voice recorder, always running. He tells children that faces disappear, but voices stay. He has hundreds of these recordings, little audio files he plays at night in his rented room behind a barber shop. He records arguments, weather, the sound of boots passing, and women who buy canes for their fathers. He records because he cannot always tell who means him harm. Sound is how he remembers, and on this particular morning, he will record every word of what happens. Nova Adeyemi clocks in at 6. She has worked at the terminal for 4 years, moving cargo pallets and loading freight buses. She is 36, 5'10", with arms built from years of lifting other people's burdens. Her mother died 6 years ago, but before she died, she told Nova one thing: do not walk past someone sliding toward the ground. Nova knows the blind cane seller by name. She buys him tea on cold mornings, carries his stool to the shade when the sun shifts, and has never asked him why a blind man with careful hands and a calm voice chooses to sit beside a bus depot instead of somewhere safer. Some questions are not hers to ask. That morning, Silas had sold 2 canes before 9. Then a man in a charcoal suit stopped in front of him and said his phone was missing. His name was Marcus Vane, Senior Vice President at Boone Global Logistics. He had been at the terminal for a private inspection, walking with 2 junior managers. He pointed at Silas and accused him of taking the phone from his jacket. Silas could not see him, but he turned his head toward the voice and said, "I did not take anything." Marcus grabbed him by the shoulder and pulled him off the stool. The cane fell. The leather pouch opened. Folded bills scattered across the platform. Silas raised both hands to cover his face, and Marcus hit him once across the side of the head. It was the sound of the first blow that made Nova look up from the freight manifest. She dropped the clipboard. By the time she reached them, Marcus had already drawn his hand back again. She caught his wrist in one hand. "Do not hit him again." He swung his other arm, but she stepped inside his reach and pinned his wrist against the steel rail without striking him. He cursed at her. People ran toward them. Phones came up. Marcus tried to jerk free. He could not. He laughed, dug into his pocket, and threw a thick fold of cash at Nova's feet. "Take it and walk away before you make your life worse." Nova looked down at the money, then back at him. She released his wrist slowly. "Pick it up yourself," she said. At least 40 phones recorded that exact moment. But the video that spread online was not the truth. Someone posted only 8 seconds. The clip began when Nova grabbed Marcus by the wrist. It ended before she released him. By noon, the headline read, "Muscular woman attacks man at city bus terminal." There was no sound of the first blow. There was no image of Silas on the ground. There was no money on the concrete. Just Nova's strong hand around a man's arm and his frightened face. The full video disappeared beneath the weight of the clipped one. Nova was called into the freight office by her shift manager, Lyle Rennick. He sat behind his desk with a printed screenshot of the video. "This is not what happened," Nova said. "I stopped a man from beating a blind old man." Lyle shook his head. "The terminal is a public space. We cannot employ someone accused of assault." She asked him to find the full video. He said there was no full video. She asked him if he had searched. He slid a termination letter across the desk, effective immediately. By the time she walked out, 4 calls had come in from people who saw the clip. One parent from the community hall asked if she would still be coaching. She said yes. Then the landlord called. The hall was called the Iron Corner, a narrow brick building 2 streets from the terminal. Nova had trained 47 kids there for free, using donated weights and padded mats. Some kids came straight from school, others came after their parents finished late shifts. The rent was always late, but the landlord had tolerated it because the hall kept the block quiet. But the day after the video, a final notice was taped to the door. Eviction in 14 days. Reason: conduct that endangered the property. Nova stood outside with the notice in her hand while a group of kids waited near the locked door. One boy asked if she was in trouble. She folded the notice. "We have 14 days, she said. That is not a no. Inside her chest, though, she was doing the math. No job, no savings, no full video to prove what happened. And now no place for the kids to go after school. By evening, a local news van parked outside the hall. A reporter asked Nova to defend the footage. She looked into the camera and said only one sentence: "The truth is longer than 8 seconds." Then she turned her back and walked toward the depot. Behind her, the reporter filed a segment titled, "Gym Worker Refuses to Explain Viral Attack." Silas went to the freight office that same afternoon to explain what he had heard and felt. They would not let him inside. He stood at the gate for 20 minutes with his cane, then walked away. That night, he sat on his narrow cot and pressed the voice recorder against his chest. He did not know how to send the audio to anyone. He only knew that the device held everything. Across town, Imani Boone watched the video on a private tablet inside the 61st floor boardroom of Boone Global Logistics. She had built the $6 billion company from a single freight depot. She had survived a house fire at 17 because her father pushed her out of a burning window. The same father who lost his sight in that fire and raised her in a small apartment above a car wash. The same father who vanished from a private care facility 4 years ago and had not been seen since. Imani had spent millions on investigators. They had chased false leads from 3 cities. She had prepared a funeral 4 years ago, then canceled it because no body was ever found. Some part of her had kept a small room in her home ready for him. Now his face was on a phone screen, lit by depot lights. Silas Boone was alive. He was sitting on a stool beside a bus platform, selling hand-carved canes, and a woman in a safety vest was being destroyed online for saving him. Imani did not cry. She had trained herself not to. She called her chief of staff and said 3 words: "Find Nova Adeyemi." The next morning, Imani flew to the city in a private jet. But she entered the neighborhood alone. She wore old jeans, a dark jacket, and no jewelry. She took a car to the corner 2 blocks from the Iron Corner and walked the rest of the way. She told no one her last name. She introduced herself as Imani, Silas's daughter. She found Nova outside the hall, loading donated boxes into a truck because the landlord had ordered the building cleared. Nova did not know who she was. She saw a tall woman with tired eyes and careful hands. She offered her water. She asked about Silas. "Is he safe?" Imani asked. Nova paused. She had walked Silas home the night before. to a small rented room behind a barber shop. She had made sure his recorder was still in his pocket. She said he was safe, but he was afraid. Imani watched her for an hour that day. She saw Nova comfort a boy who forgot his shoes. She saw Nova stand between a delivery driver and a parked car so an old woman could cross. She saw Nova refuse an envelope from a parent who could not afford fees. When Imani asked why she refused, Nova answered, "The kids should not have to pay twice for being poor." Imani stayed until the streetlights came on. Then she walked back to her car and called her attorney. She ordered him to purchase the building through a shell foundation called Common Ground Trust. No connection to Boone Global, no way to trace the purchase to her. She wanted to know who Nova really was when no one important was watching. But here is what Imani did not see. Marcus Vane had also watched the video. He had not forgotten the old man's face. It had appeared in a missing persons memo from the CEO's office 4 years earlier. He pulled up the internal file. Silas Boone, father of Imani Boone. The old man he had called a thief and struck on a public platform was the most valuable missing person in the company. That night, Marcus made one phone call. He did not tell Imani what he had learned. He told someone far more dangerous, the hall's landlord. The eviction was no longer just a business matter. It was personal. And Nova, still holding the folded notice, had no idea that the man she humiliated was a senior executive inside Imani's own empire. She did not know that the woman asking about Silas was a billionaire. She only knew that in 13 days, the Iron Corner would be gone. Nova held the phone in her hand, the screen still lit with Marcus Vane's final message. Ask Imani Boone who she really is. It was the same Imani who had sat beside her on the steps of the Iron Corner, who had asked about Silas with worry in her voice, who had quietly bought the building through a shell foundation and told Nova nothing. It was the same Imani who had watched her carry boxes, comfort children, and refuse money from a parent. The woman Nova had begun to trust. She called Imani from the empty freight yard. Her voice was sharp. "You are Imani Boone." The woman on the other end paused. "Yes, you are the CEO of Boone Global Logistics. Yes, you own the company that employs Marcus Vane." "I do. You bought my building." "I did. You lied to me about who you are. I did not tell you everything." "That is the same thing." Silence, then Imani said, "I wanted to know who you were when no one important was watching." "And what did you find?" Nova asked. "That you were exactly who I hoped you would be." But Nova was not ready to hear that. She ended the call. That night, she walked Silas home. She did not tell him who his daughter had become. She only asked if he remembered the man who had hit him. Silas reached into his coat and pulled out the voice recorder. "I remember everything," he said. He pressed play. The sound filled the small room, the accusation, the first blow, Silas's cry, Nova's voice telling Marcus to stop. 40 phones had captured the image, but only this little recorder had captured the truth. The next day, the city turned again. A local reporter named Dana Cole had been digging. She found the full incident report from the freight terminal, which had been buried. She found a witness who had uploaded the entire video to a private channel before the clip version went viral. Dana posted the full clip. It showed Marcus Vane striking Silas. It showed Nova catching his wrist and letting go. It showed the money thrown at her feet and her refusal. The comments flipped within hours, not all of them. Some people still saw a muscular woman and made up their own story. But the workers' union at the terminal called for Marcus Vane to be fired. The hall's landlord, suddenly nervous, withdrew the eviction notice. The city council issued a statement about reviewing terminal safety. Nova's phone buzzed without stopping. And Marcus Vane realized he was standing on a trapdoor. He had been publicly identified as the man in the video. Worse, he had discovered that Silas was Imani Boone's missing father. He had two choices: admit what he did, or destroy the evidence and smear Nova before Imani could connect the pieces. He chose the second. He sent a letter to the hall's landlord, offering a bribe to reissue the eviction. He leaked a story to a tabloid claiming Nova had staged the whole rescue to gain sympathy. He posted a threat to the union: if they sided with Nova, the terminal would face cuts. And he did it all from inside Imani's own company, using her name as a shield. Imani saw it coming. She called Nova again, but Nova did not answer. So Imani did the one thing she had been avoiding for months. She held a corporate press conference. The boardroom on the 61st floor was not built for honest conversations. It was built for power. Glass walls, white chairs, a podium with the Boone Global logo. Imani Boone stood behind it and looked directly into the cameras. She did not read from a script. She said, "My company failed a blind man on a public platform. My executive struck him. My system protected the man who did it. That is not a communications problem, that is a culture problem." The room went silent. But Marcus Vane was not in the room. He was outside in the corridor, with a phone pressed to his ear, trying to find a way to spin the story. One of Imani's security officers stopped him. "Miss Boone wants you inside." Marcus walked in with his head high. He had a speech prepared. He was going to say that Silas had been confused, that Nova had overreacted, that the full video had been edited. But before he could speak, a young woman at the back of the room stood up. Her name was Amara, a junior data analyst. She held a small USB drive. She said, "I have the full audio." Everyone turned. Marcus's face changed. Amara walked to the front and handed the drive to Imani. She said, "The old man gave it to me. He said to play it when the room was full." Imani played the audio. Silas Boone's voice filled the room, calm and tired. "I did not take anything." Then the sound of a blow. A cry. Nova's voice, "Do not hit him again." Marcus Vane cursing, the sound of cash falling. "Nova, pick it up yourself." The audio ended. Marcus Vane opened his mouth. Imani raised one finger. "Do not speak." She faced the room. Marcus Vane is dismissed from Boone Global Logistics, effective immediately. His conduct will be referred to the police. All security staff implicated in the cover-up will be investigated. I am closing the private inspection program that gave him access to the terminal. And I am sweeping every executive. Then she looked at Nova, who had been standing near the back, brought in by Amara without anyone knowing. Nova had not spoken. She had not given a statement. She had just listened. Imani walked toward her. "I owe you an apology." Nova held her gaze. "I do not want an apology. I want the truth." Imani nodded. "The truth is that I hid my name because I wanted to know if you were real. That was wrong. It was manipulative. And I am sorry." Nova's eyes flickered. "I accept your apology. But I do not trust you." The room was still. Imani turned back to the podium. She looked at the cameras. "Many of you are wondering why I did not fire Marcus Vane the moment the full video came out. The answer is that I did not know the full video existed. I was afraid to ask. I had built a company that was too big to see the people at the bottom. That ends now." Then she made an offer. Nova Adeyemi will receive compensation for lost wages. She will be offered a house and an executive position. She will be invited to lead a new community impact division. The room buzzed. Nova did not move. After the press conference ended, a reporter asked Imani, "What if she refuses?" Imani said, "She probably will." The reporter was right. Nova walked out of the building without speaking to Imani again. That night, she sat with Silas on the steps of the Iron Corner. She told him what had happened. He listened. Then he said, "My daughter has always solved problems with money. It is the only language she was taught." Nova nodded. "She will have to learn another one." The next morning, a letter arrived at the hall. It was from Imani. It was not typed. It was handwritten. It said, "You told me I cannot buy silence. You are right. I am not offering you money because you saved my father. I am offering you money because my company harmed you. The offer stands, but it will not buy my silence. I will testify. I will change the policies. I will walk through the terminal with you and the workers. I will not use your face in my campaign. I will ask nothing in return. I am not asking you to trust me. I am asking you to let me help." Nova read the letter twice. Then she called a meeting of the community. The hall was full. Parents, kids, terminal workers, retired women who came for chair exercises. Silas sat in the front row. Imani stood outside, not entering, waiting to see if she would be invited. Nova spoke first. She told them everything. She told them about Imani's lies, the shell purchase, the executive, the money offers. Then she asked one question. Do we want her help? The room was divided. Some people said take the money and rebuild the hall. Others said do not accept a single dollar from a woman who hid who she was. A young mother stood up. She said, my son has nowhere to go after school. I do not care where the money comes from. An old man replied, that is how we lose our souls. A boy raised his hand. Coach Nova, what do you want? Nova was quiet. Then she said, I want the hall to stay open. I want the terminal to be safe. I want Silas to be treated with respect. I do not want to be bought. Imani was brought in. She stood in the corner, not on a stage. She said, I am not here to decide for you. I am here to ask what you need. The room went silent. Then the young mother said, we need a new roof. A man said, we need jobs for the terminal workers. An old woman said, we need disability ramps. Pretty soon, the list filled the wall. Nova watched Imani listen. For the first time, Imani was not trying to solve everything with a check. She was taking notes. Her hands shook, but she stayed. By the end of the night, the group had agreed to form a community board. They would decide how the money was used. They would decide who led the hall. They would decide if Nova took any position. And Nova had one condition. Imani had to appear before the board and answer every question without a lawyer. Imani agreed, but Marcus Vane had one last move. That same night, he called a reporter from a different outlet and claimed that Imani had known Silas was her father before the video even happened. He said she had staged the rescue to bring him home and hide the company's neglect of his care facility. He claimed Nova was just a hired actor. It was a desperate lie, but it spread. The community board meeting was scheduled for Friday. If the lie stuck, everything Nova and Imani had built in that room would fall apart, and the only person who could kill the lie was a blind man with a voice recorder. Silas had one recording he had not shared. It was from before the beating. It was from the care facility. It was Imani's voice, years ago, begging him to come home. He promised to play it at the meeting. But Marcus Vane had found out about it. And he was coming. That Friday, the community board gathered in the hall. Silas sat with his recorder. Imani sat across from him. Nova stood at the door, watching. The first person to speak was not from the community. It was Marcus Vane, holding a piece of paper, demanding to be heard. Marcus Vane walked into the center of the hall like a man who still believed the room belonged to him. He held a paper above his head. The community board stopped speaking. Parents turned in their chairs. Terminal workers near the door crossed their arms. He said he had proof that Nova staged the rescue. He claimed a former freight loader named Kofi had signed a statement saying Nova paid him $50 to stand at the platform and film the incident. He said the old man was in on it from the beginning. He said the public had been played. Nova did not move. She stood beside the dry erase board with a marker in her hand. She looked at Marcus the way she had looked at him on the platform before she ever touched him. Who is Kofi? She asked. Marcus smiled. A witness. Where is he tonight? Nova asked. He is afraid of you. That is why he gave me the statement. Silas Boone stood from the front row. He leaned on his cane with one hand and held his small voice recorder in the other. His blind eyes moved toward the sound of Marcus's voice. I have a question, Silas said. Marcus turned. What is it, old man? Does the statement have my signature on it? The room went quiet. Marcus glanced down at the paper. It does not need your signature. You are blind. No, Silas said. I am blind. But I am not a man who signs things he cannot read. And I did not sign anything. Neither did Kofi, because Kofi does not exist. Marcus opened his mouth, but Silas held up the recorder. I have something too. He pressed play. The first sound was not from the platform. It was from years earlier. A woman's voice, younger, tired, pleading, "Dad, please come home. I am not asking you to live in a big house. Just be near me. I cannot lose you again." Amani's head turned. Her hands tightened around the edge of her chair. She knew the voice. It was her own. The recording had come from the care facility, from the week before Silas vanished. He had kept it all those years. Silas let the audio play for several seconds. Then he stopped it. "That is my daughter," he said. "She has been looking for me." That was not staged. That was love. Marcus shifted his weight. "That does not prove anything about Nova." "No," Silas said. "But this does." He pressed another button. The speaker crackled. Then Marcus Vane's voice filled the hall. He was talking to someone on the phone. His words were sharp and quick. "I do not care if the old man has audio. Burn the recorder. Pay whoever. I will not lose everything because of a blind beggar." The recording stopped. Several people gasped. A parent pulled her child closer. Two terminal workers stood and blocked the back door. Marcus looked around the hall. His face had gone gray. "That is not me," he said. "That is fabricated." Nova stepped forward. She took the paper from his hand and held it up. "Then explain why your private number is on this so-called witness statement," she said. "The same number Amara traced to the phone call you made to the landlord last week." Marcus's eyes darted toward the exit. He saw the workers. He saw the board president rising from her chair. "Leave," the board president said. Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came. The front door opened. Two police officers entered, followed by Amani's head of security. They had been waiting outside since the meeting began. "Marcus Vane," one officer said, "you are under arrest for assault, witness tampering, and obstruction of justice." He was escorted out. He did not fight. He did not speak. The only sound was the scuff of his shoes on the concrete as he passed Nova. She did not look at him. She was looking at Silas. When the door closed, the hall exhaled. Imani stood. She walked to the center of the room and faced the board. She did not stand behind a table or hold a microphone. She just stood there, a tall woman in dark clothes, her eyes red. "I have no excuses," she said. "Marcus Vane worked for me. The company I built gave him power. The system I allowed made him feel untouchable. That is mine to fix, not yours." The board asked her hard questions. A grandmother asked why no one from Boone Global had searched for Silas sooner. A union steward asked how many other workers had been silenced. A young mother asked what would stop the next executive from doing the same thing. Imani answered every question without a lawyer. Some answers were not good enough. The room told her so. She did not flinch. She wrote down names, policies, and gaps. By the time the questions ended, the wall was covered with demands. Then the board voted. They voted to accept the Common Ground Trust funds, but only under 3 conditions. First, the building would be held in a permanent community land trust. Second, all spending would be approved by the board, not by Imani. Third, they would elect their own director. They asked Nova to stand. "Coach Nova," the board president said, "we have watched you carry this place on your back. You did not ask for money. You did not ask for a job. You asked for a roof that does not leak, ramps for old people, and jobs that pay enough to live. The community wants you to lead this center." Nova shook her head. "I am not a manager." "No," the woman said. "You are a person who refuses to walk past someone sliding toward the ground. That is exactly who we want." The vote was unanimous. Nova stood still. Her jaw tightened. She looked at Silas, then at the kids near the back, then at Imani. "I will serve," she said. "But the board holds me accountable. If I stop listening to the people in this room, vote me out." The room clapped. Not a polite corporate clap. It was the kind of sound that shakes dust from a ceiling. After the meeting, Imani found Nova outside near the loading dock. She made 3 offers. "I will pay your lost wages," she said. Nova said no. "I will buy you a house near the terminal." Nova said no. "I will create an executive position for you." Nova said no. Imani exhaled. "Then, what do you want from me?" Nova turned to face her. Her voice was calm, but it carried the weight of every day she had worked at the terminal. I want you to protect the workers who move your freight. I want living wages, not gift cards. I want disability access at every transit hub. I want a permanent home for this haul, owned by the community, not by a shell foundation that can change its mind. And I want every security worker retrained so no one ever grabs a blind man by the shoulder and calls it procedure. Imani wrote it down. All of it. And what about you, she asked. I will be the director, Nova said, not because you offered it to me. Because my people voted me in. For the first time, Imani had no reply. Then Silas walked out of the hall. He stopped beside Nova and turned his face toward his daughter. I knew your voice the first night you called the barbershop and asked about me, he said. Imani stared at him. You knew. You said your name was Imani, Silas said. You did not say Boone. But I knew. A father does not forget the sound of the child he pushed out of a burning house. Why did you not tell me? Imani whispered. Because I was ashamed, Silas said. I disappeared because I did not want you to see me like this. A blind old man selling canes on concrete. But this woman here, she taught me something. Shame is not a good reason to hide from the people you love. Imani did not move. Then she crossed the distance and wrapped her arms around her father. They stood like that for a long time, breathing together while the freight terminal hummed in the distance. 2 weeks later, the first board meeting was held in the newly named Iron Corner Community Center. The roof had been patched with the first grant. The ramp had been built by local workers. A sign above the door read, "No one slides toward the ground alone." Nova stood at the front table. Beside her sat Silas, no longer in the back row, but as an elected board advisor. Imani sat in the third row, not at the head. Her notebook was open. She had no staff with her. The board approved the first budget. They voted to hire 2 new youth coaches. They voted to open a legal aid desk for terminal workers. They voted to create a safety review team that would walk every Boone Global hub once a month. Near the end of the meeting, Silas reached into his coat and produced a small object wrapped in brown paper. He handed it to Imani. I made this for you, he said. She opened it. It was a carved cane, small enough for a child. Why a cane, Imani asked. Because you have been walking alone for too long, Silas said. This is to remind you that you do not have to. The room went quiet. Nova looked at the ceiling. Some of the kids near the back covered their mouths. Imani held the cane with both hands. The next morning, the full recording of the board meeting was posted online. Not by Imani, not by Nova, by a parent who had sat in the back with her phone. The clip showed Marcus Vane's audio, Silas's voice, and the board vote. It ended with Nova saying, "The truth is longer than 8 seconds." By the end of the week, 4 other transit terminals announced new safety policies based on what they saw. A national workers group cited the case in a new report on violence against disabled riders. And a small photo of Nova and Silas sitting on the steps of the hall circulated without a headline. Just the 2 of them, 2 cups of tea, and the cane propped between them. But the story did not end there. Because the people who had stayed silent on the platform that morning began to speak. And what they said would test everything Nova and Imani had built. Dana Cole, the reporter who had first found the full video, started collecting audio diaries from those witnesses. One by one, they described why they had not stepped forward. They were afraid. They were confused. They thought someone else would do it. They said the money made them feel small. The last witness to come forward was the man who had posted the clip video. His name was Byron Saul, a junior manager at Boone Global. He had stood beside Marcus Vane that morning. He had seen the first blow. He had recorded the final 8 seconds, cut away everything that mattered, and sent it to a tabloid. He had been paid $500. Byron arrived at the hall one evening. He was not invited. He stood at the door with a folded paper in his hand. My name is Byron Saul, he said. I am the reason the lie spread. Nova opened the door. She looked at him for a long moment. "Come inside," she said. He stepped in. The kids were gone. The lights were low. Silas sat by the window, his recorder on the table. Byron confessed everything. He said Marcus had pressured him. He said he had been afraid of losing his job. He said he knew the truth but let the lie run. When he finished, Silas reached for his recorder. "Do you mind if I keep your voice, Byron?" he asked. Byron looked up. "Why would you want it?" "Because I record faces by voice," Silas said. "And the man who tells the truth is not the same man who hides it." Byron nodded. "You can keep it." The final entry in Silas's audio diary was recorded that night. He said, "The woman Nova caught my arm before I hit the ground. The boy Byron carried a lie but came back. My daughter Imani is still learning that power is not the same as mercy. And I am still learning that being seen does not require eyes." Then, he pressed stop. The next time the community board met, Byron was there. Not as a guest, not as an executive, as a volunteer. He unpacked boxes of food for the after-school program. He did not speak much. He did not ask for credit. Nova watched him from across the room. A board member leaned over and whispered, "Can we trust him?" Nova kept her eyes on Byron. "We will find out," she said. "But the door is open." That is how it starts. When the meeting ended, Imani walked out with Nova. The freight terminal was dark, but the hall was warm. "I have one more question," Imani said. Nova turned. "What is it?" "Why did you let Byron in after everything he did?" Nova looked at the sign above the door. "Because the first person who needs a second chance is usually the one too ashamed to ask for it." Imani nodded. She understood. Then Nova said, "But he will have to earn it. Just like you." The two women walked toward the depot, side by side. Behind them, Silas locked the hall door. He tapped his cane twice on the ground, the way he always did, and smiled. 1 year later, the Iron Corner Community Center is no longer just a building. It is a place where the terminal's evening shift can use a shower, where retired workers teach chair exercises, and where kids wait for their parents without standing on a dark street. The roof does not leak. The ramp is wide enough for 2 people. The sign outside is repainted every spring by a volunteer who once filmed the 8-second lie and has never forgiven herself. Silas Boone has started a small audio archive called Voices of the Iron Corner. People sit with him and tell stories into the recorder. Some are old, some are children. He keeps every one. He says a community is just a collection of voices that refuse to disappear. He still sells canes, but only on Saturdays. And when he walks through the terminal, workers call him by name. Imani Boone still runs a $6 billion logistics company. But she has added a new division that audits daily operations from the floor up. She spent the first 6 months after the meeting working shifts alongside cleaners, loaders, and dispatchers. The report she wrote from those nights became the basis for new pay bands, a disability access desk, and a national safety code for transit hubs. She does not talk about it in interviews. She keeps a small carved cane on her desk. Nova Adeyemi wakes before dawn. She still lifts, still coaches, still walks the same route to the terminal. But she does not wear the safety vest every day anymore. She wears the lanyard of the community director, though she keeps it tucked inside her coat because she says titles should not be the first thing people see. She answers to a board of neighbors. She is the same woman who caught Silas before he hit the ground. She is also the woman who told a billionaire no 3 times, then yes. Marcus Vane took a plea. He served 400 hours of community service, mostly cleaning transit platforms and sorting donations at food banks. It was not enough, many people said. But the court also banned him from working in logistics for 5 years and required him to pay restitution to Silas and to the workers he threatened. The last time anyone saw him, he was mopping the floor of the same terminal where he once felt untouchable. Byron Saul voluntarily testified. He is now a full-time youth coordinator. His name appears on the wall of the center, not as a donor, but as a man who chose to tell the truth after telling the lie. Dana Cole won a regional journalism award for her investigation. She donated half the prize money to the Iron Corner Roof Fund. She still visits once a month, not as a reporter, but as a neighbor. But the reason this story matters is not because of what happened to the people at its center. It matters because the same platform exists in every city. The same fear exists in every workplace. The same clip video exists for every full recording that is never shared. Somewhere right now, a person is being blamed for something they did not do. Somewhere, a bystander is deciding whether to get involved. Somewhere, an old man is being pulled off a stool by someone who believes privilege is a license. The question is not whether these moments will happen. The question is what you will do when they happen in front of you. Nova did not step forward because she was the strongest person on that platform. She stepped forward because she had been shaped by a mother who said, "Do not walk past someone sliding toward the ground." She had practiced that small courage for years, carrying boxes for coworkers, buying tea for a blind cane seller, staying late to train kids who could not pay. When the moment arrived, the decision was already made inside her. That is not natural heroism. That is a habit of attention. The internet gave the story 8 seconds. The full truth took years. A blind man's voice recorder preserved the beginning. A daughter's search carried the middle. A community vote delivered the ending. But the real ending is still being written by the people who enter that hall every day, by the terminal workers who now report unsafe conditions without fear, by the kids who run through the doors after school, and by the quiet volunteers who never appear in any video. If this story stayed with you, do not keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to remember that a single honest action can still stop a lie. Subscribe to this channel for long-form stories that go past the headline. Like the video if you believe the full truth is worth waiting for. And if you want to support more storytelling like this, join us by hitting the bell. Because the world is loud. But sometimes the most important thing you can do is be the one who steps in when everyone else is deciding. Because the moment the glass jar is falling is not the moment to debate whether to catch it. You just catch it.